This is episode 6 of Brave by Design on Patriarchy, Stress Disorder with Dr. Valerie Rein. You're listening to Brave by Design, episode 4, The Traits of a Great Manager, part 2 of 2. Welcome to Brave by Design. I'm your host, Laura Khalil. I'm an entrepreneur, coach, and speaker. I love thinking big, exploring the power of personal development, and sharing the best strategies from thought leaders and pioneers in business to empower ambitious women and allies to bravely rise and thrive. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to Brave by Design. This is your host, Laura Khalil. I am really excited for today's episode with Dr. Valerie Rein. If you have never heard of patriarchy stress disorder like me, I was like, what the heck is that about? I remember meeting Dr. Valerie a few months ago at a high-level mastermind being run by Allie Brown. If you don't know Allie Brown, I really recommend you go check her out. And Dr. Valerie and I were sitting at the same table, and she was mentioning this book and patriarchy stress disorder, and I thought, what are you talking about? And as I began to dig more into her book and her research about generational trauma and why we feel so overwhelmed, anxious, like we can never do enough, the results were absolutely astounding. So I'm thrilled to have her on the show today. I can't wait for you to hear this. We'll dig in just a minute. I want to remind you, if you enjoy these episodes and you want to go a little bit deeper, I want you to join the Brave by Design community on Facebook, because every Wednesday at noon Eastern, I go live and I talk to you about the episode. We answer your questions. We go behind the scenes. It is a great way to engage directly with me, to engage with other lovers of the show. And that is open to everyone who likes the show and wants to learn more, wants to ask questions, wants to be there. So you can join the community by heading to forceofbadassery.com. Click on the link in the header. It says join the community. We would absolutely love to have you there. Also want to let you know that if you are interested in joining my small group coaching to get more career clarity for 2020, if you're tired of spinning your wheels, if you feel stuck, if you don't know how to start, that's what I help specialize in. So we are starting that program on February 22nd. It is a quarterly program working in small group coaching with me, and I'd love to talk to you about it. So you can actually schedule a 20-minute call with me, and I'll tell you more about how that works and what it's about, and we can determine if it's a good fit for you. And if it's not, that's okay too. There are other great programs I can recommend as well. Without further ado, let's start this episode. Everyone, I'm so excited for today's guest. I have Dr. Valerie Rein. She is a psychologist, women's mental health expert, and business consultant who helps people achieve the best ROI by achieving the best mental health without therapy. Dr. Valerie specializes in uncovering the hidden traumas that hold hostage people's best work, relationships, and well-being, and effectively heals them with a powerful mind-body methodology. She is a sought-after speaker at conferences and companies committed to diversity and inclusion, leadership development, and unlocking people's potential. Her book, which we are going to discuss today, blew my mind. It is called Patriarchy Stress Disorder: The Invisible Barrier to Women's Happiness and Fulfillment. Dr. Valerie, welcome to Brave by Design.
Laura, such a joy to be here. Thank you for this great intro.
My pleasure. I was reading your book and I had light bulbs just going off left and right. And the way I want to start, before we get into, just defining patriarchy stress disorder, can you start the book with a very powerful story? And so I would love if you could just tell us a little bit about that and how you became inspired to write this book.
Yes, the moment of inspiration. Well, the inspiration probably has been there all my life as a girl and woman living in the patriarchal world, wondering all my life, what's wrong with me? And that got me on the path of studying psychology. of course, in my desperate attempt to figure out what is wrong with me, and 2 graduate degrees later, I had it all. I had a thriving practice in New York. I had a family and home I adored. And one fine day, I was on the phone with a client when I felt the left side of my face and the left side of my body go weak and numb.
Mm,
And yeah,
that's
who,
terrifying.
yeah, I was concerned, and so I got out and drove myself to the ER
Of
using my
course you
right
did.
arm.
What would a woman do? She would feel like she's having a stroke and drive herself to the ER. Yep.
And that just tells you a little something about how PSD operates. But at that point, I don't know that yet. All I know is that I am having these symptoms of a stroke, and I am getting to the ER, and they're scanning me up and down. And as I relaxed, I started to feel better. The verdict was it wasn't a stroke. Thank goodness. It was quote unquote just stress. And that was a very puzzling verdict for me because I did not feel stressed. I did not feel stressed. I thought I was living my dream life. Yeah, I was busy. Yeah, I was working long hours, but I loved what I did. And so I started looking at kind of my life and my work also. And I started realizing very uncomfortably that this interruption of my busy, 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 busy life, that was that ER episode, created a hole in the security blanket of stress and busyness. And through that hole, a very uncomfortable realization began to seep in. I had checked off all the boxes that the society told me I needed to feel happy and fulfilled. And I didn't feel happy and fulfilled. In fact, I didn't feel much of anything at all. I didn't feel unhappy. I didn't even feel stressed. I was a dead woman walking.
Mm,
And and that caused me to take a look at that initial question, what is wrong with me? Because my clients are showing great results. They're healing from numbness, anxiety, depression. They're stepping into the fullness of their lives. What am I doing for them that I'm not doing for myself? And the answer was that with all of my clients, I was using mind body tools for trauma healing. And the reason was, although none of them actually recalled any traumatic experiences, but they all showed that this telltale symptom of trauma, which is disconnection from parts of ourselves, from parts of the fullness of our self expression, parts of our body, parts of our emotions, dreams, desires. I wonder if that sounds familiar to our audience. I certainly was very disconnected myself. If the left side of my body going completely offline is not a,
yeah.
a telltale sign, I don't know what is. But I got really interested in what kind of trauma could we all have without even realizing it. And research was coming out on generational transmission of trauma, which was my light bulb moment. For thousands of years, women have been oppressed. Oppression is traumatic, and trauma is genetically transmitted. So, this is something we're born with in our DNA, in our systems, and we're born with all these adaptations that trauma creates to keep us safe. And that leads to very high stress levels chronically for high achieving women because here we are achieving in the world where it's never been safe for a woman to be visible, to be powerful, not even an option, to be wealthy, to love who she loves. But here we are, we're doing all these things as we should. But that trauma, that generational trauma, gets activated in our subconscious, signaling unsafe, 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 unsafe all the time. And that burns us out. It causes a lot of issues: adrenal fatigue, trouble sleeping, trouble relaxing without a glass of wine or a pill, et cetera, et
Mm,
cetera, et cetera, which high achieving women are unfortunately very familiar with. And my discovery and my message in the book is there is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you. There's nothing to fix. This is the trauma that we inherited, and we can heal it. And there are tools to heal it. And it starts with recognizing it. So that's what Patriarchy Stress Disorder, the book, is all about.
Wow. What a terrifying moment you had that provided sort of a doorway to
Hmm.
explore this. I always tell the audience that it's sometimes in the greatest challenges that the greatest opportunities are revealed to us. And it certainly
Mm-hmm.
seems like that may have been the case for you. So,
Indeed.
when we talk about patriarchy stress disorder, you're talking about this inherited trauma that shows up in these symptoms. So even if you have not experienced trauma within your life that you're conscious of,
Mm-hmm.
this through an epigenetic link, this may be appearing in your life. And what are some of the surprising ways that PSD can appear in our lives? Is it through
Mm-hmm.
our beliefs? Is it through our actions?
That's a great question. And there are a myriad of ways, and I'm going to talk to them in a moment. But I want to also segue and let the listeners know how I define trauma. Trauma is any experience that made you feel unsafe physically or emotionally in your fullest authentic expression and caused trauma adaptations to develop to keep you safe going forward. So it's not only a life threatening experience. These are the so called capital T traumas, but there are a lot of lowercase t traumas, little t traumas that no one escapes.
Mm.
Being ridiculed, being laughed at, being neglected, or even, I write about it in the book, and that's revelatory for a lot of women, is when our joy is suppressed.
Yes,
We,
yes.
mm-hmm. Did you resonate with that too?
Oh my God, yes. I love how you talk about joy being our true north because it really
Hmm.
keeps you in touch with yourself. Absolutely. I don't even think women truly understand the meaning of or remember the meaning of that felt experience. It seems so rare for many of
Yeah,
us.
it is about remembering, becoming whole again. And it's true. And again, not our fault. I tell a story in the book that is actually on my podcast, interview with Bernadette Pleasant. And she is the founder of FEM, which is a movement to help women embody their emotions through freestyle dance. But how she got to it was, um, she shares her experiences of at school. She won this important award, and she was so happy, jumping for joy, skipping all the way home. And the moment she walked in, she felt that it wasn't a good day for her mother. Her mother suffered from depression, and it felt like all the air was sucked out of the room. And so, in that moment, she put the lid on her joy. She understood it
Mm.
was not welcomed. And that's how it got repressed. And I hear it from a lot of women now. I am having a lot of conversations now through talks and women reaching out to me, sharing their stories, just discovering that, oh my gosh, my mother did not delight in me when I was growing up. And I did not realize that that was traumatic for me, and that it actually reflects in my life right now. So, the definition of trauma, it runs deep, it is big. And even though we don't think about it, we may not even remember these instances, but our body does not forget and the body doesn't lie. And we carry so much undigested, unprocessed, repressed joy and sadness and anger and all these things that over time limit our capacity to be who we truly are. They lock up our authentic selves in this invisible inner prison. And then, coming back to your original question of the symptoms, what we experience is we're either holding ourselves back from truly being who we are and playing big in the world, And that happens because our nervous system signals unsafe, 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 and the nervous system protects us from going into fight, flight, or freeze. So, as women, we either stay in freeze and we find ourselves setting goals, but not really accomplishing them, or engaging in self sabotage, and then beating ourselves up,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not our fault. Or we're moving toward the goals, we are playing big, and our nervous system is always hyper vigilant, hyper activated, and that results in chronic stress. And the way it shows up in the mind, in the body, and in our actions is actually through very familiar things, such as the inner critic.
Mm-hmm. We
I
know
call
him or her.
Yeah, and I call all those things that show up as trauma defenses, I call them prison guards
Yep.
in the context of this invisible in the prison that is trauma, because they are legitimately there to keep us safe. But the only way they know to keep us safe is by keeping us locked up. And in my programs and in my system, I teach women to recognize them and to help them evolve from prison guards to bodyguards. So, more of the prison guards that you may recognize right away, our listeners, I haven't met anyone who is not familiar with those,
Mm-hmm.
is the imposter syndrome, is the so-called upper limit problem, when we're again self-sabotaging our growth and what we desire. Oftentimes we don't even know what we desire, because desires are also protected by prison guards, because there's nothing more dangerous to the patriarchal status quo than a woman who is in touch with her desires.
Oh,
Just think
tell
of
me
that.
about it. Tell me about it. I want to touch on something you mentioned in your story
Mm-hmm.
about your client. How many women feel guilty or shame to
Yeah.
feel joyful?
Oh my.
Because
Yeah.
that's what we're learning is I can't have this experience right now because it's not accepted.
Yeah. Yeah. Guilty, ashamed about our desires, about our pleasure as well. There is so much shut down in the pleasure department, and not only sexual pleasure, although that is a big part of it, but the pleasure of everyday life. We are so conditioned by this culture to just go on autopilot, just work, 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 get your paycheck, maybe exercise, do the quote unquote the right things,
Yep.
and then go to sleep and then start all over the next day. Have some wine if you're, having trouble managing all that anxiety and stress, or go talk to a therapist. And that's fine, talking to a therapist is fine. And it doesn't resolve the core trauma unless your therapist is specifically trained in mind body trauma resolution and is specifically aware of how generational trauma affects us.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes this imprisonment for women of also being in this hamster wheel of self improvement, personal development workshops, therapy,
It's
self
never
help
enough.
books. Never enough. And we never arrive. And the big lie is, of all these industries, the big lie is that something's wrong with you and you need to fix it.
Amen. That's I know. And it is so disempowering. So
Yeah. And
disempowering.
so untrue. It's just plain and simple. It's just a lie. And my hope is that if our listeners get, like, if nothing else stays from this conversation other than this message that there is nothing wrong with you, you need to dig deeper, you need to take a look at this generational trauma and liberate yourself from it. And then everything that shows up as this quote unquote problems is solved. Even anxiety, depression, addiction, problems we run into in our relationships, lack of intimacy, or trouble finding the one and forming that loving, supportive relationship, that is all rooted in this core trauma for women. That the core wound of patriarchy is, I call it the wound of worthlessness,
Mm-hmm.
worthlessness. Women have been taught for thousands of years through all our experiences that our minds, our bodies, our lives are worth less than men's. Period. End of story. It's just a message of patriarchy that it exercises through political and financial and other powers.
You
And
say something in the book, if I could interrupt you. You say
absolutely.
the unconscious privilege of men
Mm-hmm.
is that they are being believed in.
Yeah.
Where as women, we do not have that privilege of automatically being believed in. We always have to prove. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this up. And for our listeners, I also want to say, like, in case you're thinking, oh, well, I did grow up in a very supportive family. My parents did believe in me and my teachers and my mentors. And this may be true. And it's great that you've had this experience. And your subconscious mind has been also getting messages from the overculture that there's never been a woman president, that women CEOs in the Fortune 500 companies is less than 5%, that
Hmm.
women have been underpaid and continue being underpaid, especially women of color. And it is just everywhere. Women's bodies are being policed um, on social, in all kinds of media. And then it imprints as the war on our own bodies that we're having since, I don't know, very early on, troublingly so. And again, we're thinking something is wrong with us. We're looking in the mirror, we're being self critical. Oh, I don't look sexy. Oh, I don't feel good about myself. What am I going to wear? Right? Does this make me look fat, etc.?
Hmm.
But all of that is not individual. That all comes from the culture that does not believe in women as equals, as powerful, beautiful beings. It makes our beauty conditional. So it sells us the beauty. Like, yeah, sure, you're ugly, but buy this makeup. Maybe it will make you a little bit marginally acceptable. Buy this outfit.
Yeah.
And it always places the guilt and the blame on women, and then we internalize it and we carry it, and it's so heavy and it's so toxic and it's so difficult. And when we are in the work setting, we have big goals, we know that we're capable, we are confident in our abilities, but we struggle with career advancement, we struggle asking for that raise, or if we work for ourselves, we may struggle fully unfurling our talents and feeling supported, and that again is coming from the culture that is not your individual issue. I assure you, even women who are quote unquote on top of the world, I quote them in the book, such as Meryl Streep talks about her imposter syndrome that she still has. I
Isn't
mean,
that
come
crazy?
on, come on, Gail King and Diane von Furstenberg and
Yeah.
all these women. If you just Google, you'll find so many quotes, and I know they're telling the truth. So achievement doesn't resolve PSD. It is the culture, and it is the imprints of generations of trauma, and we need to heal it for ourselves and generations of women.
Dr.
It's
Valerie,
on us. Yeah.
it is on us, and we will, certainly with your help. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that epigenetic link because you tell this amazing story about some of the research in the labs with, I believe it was with mice.
Hmm.
Can you share that so people can understand if they're thinking, well, wait a minute, how can what happened to my grandmother or great grandmother or grandfather, whoever it may be, how can
Yeah.
that affect me today? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's thank you for asking. There is this great study that I love so much. It has to do with mice and cherry blossoms. And in it, researchers introduced the smell of cherry blossoms to mice and simultaneously zapped their feet with mild electric shocks. And then later, after the fact, mice who were bred and their
Mm.
children and grandchildren, when exposed to the smell of cherry blossoms, showed a strong fear and anxiety reaction. Okay, so let that sink in for a moment. For, for all we know, mice don't sit around the fire or the TV and tell their children, grandchildren, beware of cherry blossoms. For all we know, there is no storytelling involved. However, there is something that gets passed down as an imprint of a traumatic experience and an adaptation to it. And the adaptation is fear and anxiety. And neuroscientists were actually able to see that it is transmitted genetically. There are specific genetic markers that get transmitted. And interestingly, trauma healing is transmitted as well. So when we resolve the experience, we no longer pass it down. And that is the gift of epigenetics to us, because it gives us back the power. No matter what happened in the past, in our lifetime, or our parents or grandparents or the culture that feels like, oh my gosh, I have no control over it. You do. You absolutely do. It's not by talking about it, that's not going to solve anything. But there are specific mind, body, and energy techniques for accessing and releasing those traumatic imprints from our nervous systems, from our bodies, so that we can be free.
One question that I love that you ask in the book, and this really got me thinking, is you ask, what are you tolerating? I
Mm,
don't think I have ever asked myself that question. And it really prompted me to begin to write down, well, what am I tolerating? What are those things that I'm dealing with and that many of us are dealing with? And I think you give a statistic, you estimate about 90% of what we're doing is things that are sort of zapping our energy.
mm,
And so I pose that to the audience. Dr. Valerie has a number of incredible exercises in this book, but that one in particular, it's one of the earlier ones, really affected me. I thought, gosh, what am I tolerating?
yeah. Yeah, that's very awakening.
It
It's
is.
really confronting. You're right. Nobody asks us. Well, nobody asks us what we desire as
Right.
women, right? You go to school, you get a job, you get married, you have kids.
That's it. You're doing what you should.
And then it really backfires big. It did for me when I realized, oh my goodness, I have done it all that I was quote unquote supposed to do, and I wasn't feeling happy or free. And that's a huge realization. That's a huge letdown, and you don't want to get to that point. And if you do, that's fine. But if you can get something, interrupt that trajectory even before,
Yep.
because that awakening oftentimes happens, through a crisis, through like it did for me
Like
and,
it did for
and
you and for many women. And I think
many
there's
women.
probably many women who, like me, grew up and have been very ambitious and very
Hmm.
driven. And there we have grown up in a culture, and I think this is a patriarchal structure of this fetishizing of the mind. So
Yeah.
everything is about the mind and what you're thinking. But people don't remember that's not doing anything, that's not an embodied experience. And so we can become, as women, incredibly disconnected from the body when we just glorify the mind. So when you talk about dropping into our bodies and uh, becoming more integrated, I think that is critical for us to
Hmm.
heal.
It is. And it is a cultural divide of the mind and the body. And you're absolutely right. The mind is glorified. And all our conventional systems operate with that core premise, such as the medical field and the field of psychology. There's a divide of the mind and the body.
Yep.
And it's, again, one of those lies. How is there a divide? Everything is interconnected. What you feel in your body affects how you think.
We
And
need both.
And it's a constant feedback loop. So we cannot heal one without the other, and one is also key to healing, or the interplay of the two, or actually more than two. It's mind, body, and spirit, and your energy. Everything needs to be holistically brought together for us to heal.
Dr. Valerie, I want to ask you two questions and then learn more about what you're up to next. The first thing is, I want to ask you about a quote in the book. You say that you mentioned earlier our prison guards, and you say that our defenses show up in the stories we form about our experience and the choices we make that replay out trauma. Our prison guards protect from whatever makes sense to them to protect us from embarrassment, heartbreak, abandonment, and rejection. I want to ask you a little bit more about this replaying trauma aspect. Is that something that we are on an unconscious or subconscious level continuing to do?
Yeah. I'll give you an example of one of my clients, and that story is in the book. She came to me because, as a type A woman, she had a list of what she wanted to accomplish by age 30.
Mm,
And number one on her list was finding the one. And she was dating. She's had a series of unfortunate dating experiences, and it looked like she kept lowering the bar with each subsequent failure, because her conclusion in her mind was, well, if I can't make it work with this guy who has like no job and no ambition,
oh
I
God.
don't deserve anyone better. So next time I'm going to date somebody who also has a drinking problem and lives with his parents. Right. And I'm
Wow.
exaggerating, but not so much. That was a downward spiral trajectory. And in her work situation, she was experiencing the same thing. She was being underappreciated, underpaid, overworked. And that all stemmed from the same source, from that wound of worthlessness, which of course she had no idea about. She thought something was wrong with her, right? What
Yeah.
else? What else? And so we started working on uncovering and healing that wound. And she met someone who was just so mind blowingly out of the realm of what she thought was possible for her. He treated her like an amazing goddess that she is. And at work, her situation also changed. She was able to find a different job where she was also appreciated
Mm,
and paid well, and got a flex schedule. And what started happening with her relationship, actually, and with her job, that her mind wanted to sabotage it. um,
wow.
she would The mind would tell her stories. Oh, wait till he finds out the real you. You can never move in together. He'll see the real you,
Oh.
and he'll leave. So thankfully we continued working together on unpacking those layers of defenses, of protective mechanisms, really. And uh, and we did so successfully, and they're happily married, and she's happily, her career is skyrocketed. And that's just what's possible with knowing what is truly affecting you. Again, there's nothing wrong with you, and there are trauma defenses. And when they're at play, they are trying to keep you safe, but there is a better way. What they're doing is
Mm,
based on the millennia of it not being safe for women to be visible and wealthy and powerful and love who we love. Was not even possible. And now it's actually more unsafe to not have that.
right.
so so yeah, we just need to upgrade those.
That is so powerful. I'm imagining that our listeners are hearing that and wondering where that's appearing in their lives. Because certainly I think about that and I replay, well, what limiting beliefs do I keep myself from playing small, you know?
Hmm.
One of the things I want to ask you, so we've talked a lot about the patriarchy. And I want to distinguish between the patriarchy and men because this is not about man bashing. And
Yeah.
and I would imagine that men may also be affected by
Oh,
patriarchy
a
stress disorder.
100%. I do focus on women because w- I am a woman and that is
Sure.
closer to home for me. And I feel that learning about men and helping men is in our near future probably a trajectory of this work, because what ends up happening is that women come to work with us and then they start experiencing what I call how good can it get, and they're up leveling in every area of their life, and so they want the best in their relationship as well, so they bring their partner in.
Yeah.
And that's a glorious thing. Absolutely, patriarchy does not equal men, and men does not equal patriarchy. Men are also really traumatized because what patriarchy says is that, well, you get, as a man, you get membership in this power club, but the cost of membership is really high. You got to abandon your authentic self. You got to show up in these very specific ways. Um, Boys don't cry. Boys
Mm.
don't show emotions. Boys are not nurturing. Boys are aggressive and competitive, and that's how the world works. And what we see is, even with very high powered men, and maybe even especially with very high powered men, there is so much unhappiness. There is so much just constant suffering. Just a lot of just living in this internal hell that they may not even recognize, because it just feels like that's just life.
Yep,
No,
that's how it
man
is.
up. That's just how life is. But it is living in survival versus living in thriving. And we can all humans can benefit from healing trauma, no exceptions.
Absolutely incredible. Dr. Valerie, thank you so much for sharing this. I'd love for you to also let our listeners know what's next if they want to learn more about the book and other things that you're offering.
Yeah, absolutely. drvalerie.com is where you can download the first chapter of the book. And the link to purchase the entire book on Amazon is there as well. And also, you will find a little button that says something like get on the wait list. And what that is about is that on the heels of the book, for those who've read the book, who are resonating with the book, who are resonating with this message, and are ready to turn this useful information into an actual transformation of their life, shift from survival to thriving, abandon the game of how much can I bear, and master the game
Yep.
of how good can it get. For these wonderful women, it is for women at this point. However, you can use the tools and share with men in your lives as well, and people across the gender spectrum. We are opening doors to our virtual journey, and it's the curriculum picks up where the book leaves off and gives a very detailed and granular instructions for how to identify that the layers of inherited cultural and personal trauma, how to identify all the prison guards, those trauma defenses that are getting in the way of you having your best life, how to evolve them into your bodyguards. And that is truly life changing. I'm teaching the same tools I use myself, and I use them every day, because to go, uh, well, I wanted to say bigger, but what I really mean is to unfurl more of who we authentically are in our work in the world and in our personal lives. We need to get deeper into the dungeons, into the in the invisible inner prison that's holding us back, because there are layers and layers and layers, and every step of our way toward our desires reveals a deeper layer to heal. And speaking of desires, I do have supplemental materials on the website, which you can access even before you get the book, although they will make more sense in the context. And among them, there is this meditation on desire, and I highly recommend it because in itself, it's very catalytic awakening, and it will show you right away how your desire may be accessible or not, and the prison guards that are maybe protecting you from claiming it. And it's at drvalerie.com, and you will look for book resources in the menu.
That is absolutely beautiful. I'm going to rush over right now and go find that because I can't wait to learn more. Dr. Valerie, thank you so much for being on Brave by Design with us. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Laura, and thank you everyone who tuned in today for sharing your time with us.
I want to thank you for joining me, and remember to subscribe through your favorite app so you can stay up to date. And I would love your review. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and comment on Apple Podcasts. You can also keep in touch with me online. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm also on Instagram at Force of Badassery. All that information will be available in the show notes. Until next time, stay brave.